Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lowdown. Today I am absolutely delighted to be joined by the UEFA A licensed candidate coach, Chris Summersell. Chris is also an avid Spurs fan and does some performance analysis and recruitment consultancy work at Inside Market. Chris is here today to discuss all things Tottenham Hotspur. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Chris, to begin, where did this love for Spurs come from?
Oh, I don't know. No, I do. It's I wouldn't say it's a love. It's more of a labour of love. But it came through a family. My dad's a Tottenham fan. My granddad was a Tottenham fan. Granddad was born within a stone's throw of Whitehall Lane. His first game was in like the 1930s, I think. So like before we were even good in the first place. And my dad's first game in the 60s, my first game in the 90s. It's just a family thing, and it's very deep inside, and obviously I work in football now, and separating Tottenham as a fan and Tottenham as a supposed expert is difficult. But yeah, I love the club. I travel home and away, European games. I was in Amsterdam for the semi-final a couple of years ago, and obviously the final in Madrid, which didn't go our way. So it's sort of embedded within me, and even now living in Edinburgh, Scotland, I still will be renewing my season ticket when fans are allowed back in, and trying to get into as many games as I possibly can. Because I'm proper coys.
That's brilliant. But as a Chelsea fan myself, I wouldn't have too many Spurs supporting mates. But ironically, the few that I do have, they do mention when I ask them that same question, their love for Spurs. It always kind of resonates, as we were saying off camera. Begins with a certain individual player, be it Ozzy Ardiles, Jimmy Greaves, Glenn Hoddle, David Ginola, most recent years, Gareth Bale. Why are individuals more remembered at Tottenham and perhaps not so many teams?
I think it's because a lot of the time, we've never been like a dominant force in terms of league titles. We've never had like dominant teams, so to speak. We've had, when me growing up, it was like David Ginola. It was the only reason why you went to Tottenham, and in the late 90s, because he was the only player who could do something interesting and get you off your seat. So yeah, it is an interesting thing. And obviously we've had our cup successes, but they have always generally been off the back of someone's brilliance. So our 1991 FA Cup, last FA Cup we won, just before my time, like going to the games and whatever, that was all about Paul Gascoigne. He just absolutely dragged us, a pretty mediocre team, which was falling apart, through to the final, and he got injured in the final, did his ACL, but obviously we won it. But I think that's it. And Spurs have this, I guess, a history of trying to play with style and being entertainers, and we've had those sort of maverick footballers who've perhaps propped up more average players. My granddad, would talk about like Danny Blanchflower, Jimmy Greaves. My dad loved Jimmy Greaves, but there was Glenn Hoddle, Chris Waddle, and you get Gascoigne, and then for me it was like Ginola, Teddy Sheringham to a certain extent, and I guess in recent years it has been a bit more about the team. We've had fantastic players, but it's been trying to pick your favourite one, because we've had a group of really good players, and unfortunately a trophy just sort of eluded that group of players. But I think definitely in the past we've had a sort of a focus on brilliant individuals who entertain.
And then you look at that shift in the narrative, so to speak, the Harry Redknapp years at Spurs and Pochettino's 5-year cycle. How did the matchday experience going down to White Hart Lane, how was that drastically different to what it was as a youngster growing up, as you said, looking forward to watching the likes of Ginola or a Gascoigne?
That's a good question. Because when I started going, you'd hear people talk about Tottenham being a big club, cups, the 80s and 60s and success. But you always kind of doubted it in your mind. It's like, well, we're mid-table every year. And I said, you only got like David Ginola to keep you vaguely interested. And then there was a shift, and in terms of where we started becoming a bit more of a serious club. And it happened, I think it happened before Harry Redknapp, to be honest. I guess Martin Yole took us to fifth and sixth, got into Europe, and it's difficult to call it a progression because we've had a few sort of bumps in the road. You know, we won a trophy with Juan de Ramos, but then we had 2 points from 8 games under him. And that's when Redknapp came in. But yeah, you know, I was never a huge fan of Redknapp as a sort of like a coach and tactician, but the team was entertaining. We played good football, but there was a switch, a very real switch, I think, where Tottenham fans started to believe that we were again a big club, and that was, I think, when we beat Inter Milan 3-1 at home. Everyone remembers Bale's hat-trick a few weeks before in the San Siro. We lost 4-3, and that actually game that game in, you know, the 4-3 perpetuated this notion that Tottenham were a team of one individual who still lost the game. But then we beat Inter 3-1 at White Lane a few weeks after, and Bale absolutely tore Maicon apart. And but the first goal we scored, it was Modric was, you know, going in the midfield and played a lovely little through ball to Van der Vaart. And I just remember that was the switch for me, where you thought, actually, Tottenham are starting to get back to where, you know, maybe, I hate to say where we belong, but where, you know, where we've been in the past, where we were doing some interesting things. So that was the real sort of switch moment. And again, we had some bumps in the road, you know, because we didn't get back into the Champions League for a few seasons after that. But I think fans and myself, you know, we started believing in ourselves a bit more. And, you know, we got AVB and we finished fourth, but didn't get to the Champions League because a certain team from West London managed to fluke a Champions League in Munich. But yeah, and I think Pochettino coming in, he accelerated that. You know, even, you know, when he came in 2014, if you'd have said it within 5 years you'd be in a Champions League final, I'd been like, all right, yeah, calm down. Let's just try and get to Europa League final first, or just win a League Cup or something like that. Or get back in the Champions League. But he accelerated that process, and it's sort of at a point of no return now. We've got this massive new stadium, a sort of massive profile, you know, throughout Europe. I'd say massive, you know, we're a well-known club. Obviously, everyone knows us for Harry Kane and Son and like that, but we've not got the trophies to show for it. But we are treated like a big club, and I think the fans expect like a big club, even though we've still got a few constraints compared to the teams we're trying to compete with. So yeah, that's a long way of saying, you know, I think we've changed our profile in the last few years.
Certainly so. Even from a Chelsea perspective, I can definitely attest to that. But I suppose bringing it forward to the current day under Mourinho, and you have that quote, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, in the expert's mind there are a few. We had Mourinho after his United stint just before he took the reins at Tottenham, speaking about Charles Darwin, the evolution of man, how he was a changed man himself, how he had to adapt himself to new ideas. Do you see, I think I know your answer already on this one, do you see a changed Mourinho at Spurs?
Oh, that I've been backed into a corner here, haven't I? I mean, when he came in, he you know, he did say these things about change of style, and at first I was vaguely hopeful, you know, because João Sacramento is his, you know, a new assistant coach for me. He's always had like Rui Faria and his like trusted backroom staff, and I thought, okay, this is interesting. Let's hope we're going to have you know, let's hope he actually does what he says for once, because we know he's like, he will say things for you know, for the camera, and he's all about optics and trying to, you know, you have to sort of read between the lines of him sometimes. But ultimately, no, we've not seen a great change in style from Mourinho. Yes, we have seen games where we've been, let's say, attacking. We've, you know, when I say attacking, it's, you know, because of the quality we've got, we have to be on the attack some games, because some teams just give us the ball. And I have question marks over whether we are as coached as well as we were under Pochettino in terms of when we have the ball and manipulating opposition. But as we know, as soon as you come up against anyone who's vaguely decent, and I say vaguely decent, we did it to Arsenal the other day, who aren't a brilliant team. They're, you know, a decent team, they're an improving team. They're certainly not the Arsenal of old. And we went to the Emirates and played like we were battling relegation. And we've done that to so many teams. And yes, we picked up some results. We've also not picked up results in those games. And it's been pretty dreadful. So, and we're 18 months into his stint. There is no discernible style of play other than we know what we're going to do against a big team, where we're going to sit back, we're going to drop everyone back into our own half, and hope for Kane and Son to do something special on the break, which for me is sort of a gross mismanagement of these two wonderful footballers who should be close to the opposition's goal as often as possible. But ultimately, he was brought in, despite what he said about change of style, he was brought in to win trophies. That was the last thing. I reject this the notion that Pochettino didn't have this winner's mentality or didn't have that last thing to pick up trophies for us. I just think ultimately he gambled on trying to win a big trophy. He got fairly close. We did okay in the FA Cups. We lost a couple of semi-finals, and I don't think it was down to any sort of systemic mindset, attitude, mentality issues. I just think it was we didn't always get the rub of the green, and I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer. But Mourinho came in to change that. You immediately saw all the Spurs social media, the Amazon documentary is about winning, is about mentality. And like the mentality of the Pochettino was as solid as I've ever seen Tottenham, was as the resilient and as focused as you could find. And I think that possibly rubbed the Spurs players up the wrong way. But yeah, he's talked about trophies and winning, and we're 18 months in. We've not got a dominant style of play. We've not got an entertaining style of play. We've not got an effective style of play. Because I think lots of Spurs fans would have said, okay, let's just suck it up. And, if he's going to win something. And yes, we're in a League Cup final in a couple of weeks' time. But, I mean, we're playing Man City. It's going to be a very, very tough game to win. But even if we do win it, is it worth all that we've had to sort of suffer in the last years? When I say suffer, it's not the end of the world. We're not getting relegated or anything. And I don't think it is. And I fully expect Man City to win because they are just a very, very good team. And then we'll be back to square one, just aiming for the top four, which it's going to be very difficult to get in there. We've got a reasonably difficult run in. We could end up at the end of the season 5th or 6th with no trophies. And you can't tell me after 18 months that is worth it, particularly as no one's enjoying the football. So, yeah, I know that's a bit of a downer answer. As a whole, I'm quite positive about the future of the club. I really am. I think we've got the infrastructure in place and the sort of profile now that we can kick on with some smart decisions. But at the moment, I just think we're being sort of held back, and I just don't think 18 months in, anyone can just claim that he's been a success.
Of course. And I suppose from a stylistic point of view, what are the main, discernible changes in the style of play and formation-wise, even between Pochettino at Spurs, what Mourinho's side are doing now?
I mean, I guess in terms of the system, the 4-2-3-1, we played that a lot with in the Pochettino. And when Jose started, he in his first game, he started with a 4-2-3-1, but Aurier was really high up on the right. Ben Davies would tuck in and on as a sort of a left centre back, and with the aim of using sort of his progressive passing, which is sort of fallen off a cliff a little bit. Ben Davies, because a couple of years ago he was pretty good in that role, and it was actually similar to Tottenham 17-18 team under Poch. But in terms of the style, it's very different. Obviously Pochettino came in and immediately got to work on a sort of progressive possession team where it certainly wasn't a sort of Guardiola type possession game. It was, it was a bit less risk on the ball. We would move it forward quickly and we would counter press very quickly and effectively. And that, the first season 14-15, we played with sort of quite an ineffective central midfield. It didn't quite go to plan, but I think that season was a bit about building his principles play. And I don't think we changed next season. I think the 15-16 season where it took off is where that style of play amongst the group of players really took hold. Then sort of Dembele came back into the team because he'd sort of been on the naughty step the season before, because I think he was playing up a bit. And things took off from there, and we were dominating nearly all teams in their half with the ball. Pressing aggressively, we weren't a team that sort of set pressing traps or anything. It was sort of a man-to-man press, high up, force long balls, we'd pick up the ball at the back because Vertonghen and Alderweireld were so like imperious at the back, and then we'd come back at you, and it was just this sort of, it was like we'd put teams in a vice. We'd squeeze the life out of them, and some days we were highly entertaining, some days we were more functional, some days we just would squeeze the life out of teams and finish. You'd come away thinking, oh, we've not played very well. Then you look at the stats, we did like 25 shots or something. You're like, okay, this is a really good team here. I think over time, Pochettino, he adapted, because people said he never had a plan B, which is nonsense, because we adapted constantly under him. That season after, we went to a back three, played a 3-4-3 in a lot of games, with like Dele and Ericsson as sort of inside forwards, still with the same sort of dominant style of progressive possession, get it in the other half and just keep it there, and heavy pressing. Just force teams. They don't only have one option: play a long ball back over the top, and we'd have it again. And what we found that season was we had a few problems with certain teams. We could not contain the German style counter press. So early, even that early Klopp Liverpool team, which was a flawed team in many respects, but they would dominate us consistently because it was just not compatible. Our style was not compatible with that, to nullify it. And we really struggled with Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League that season. So 17-18, he adapted again. We played, we beat Liverpool at Wembley on the counter-attack, beat them 4-1. We sat back a little bit deeper, certainly not parking the bus style. We had periods of possession. We did that to Borussia Dortmund, beat them 3-1 at Wembley, beat Real Madrid 3-1 at Wembley. So we were adapting as a team. But I think that was where the team really peaked, that 2017, between 2016 and 2018. And then we started sort of falling away a little bit, which was obviously covered up hugely by our amazing run to the Champions League final. But ultimately, the goal was always to dominate games, to play on the front foot. If we were pushed back, we weren't pushed back for long. We would adapt to play a bit more counter-attacking in certain situations. We did that a little bit in the Champions League run as well. But overall, the style was very clear. We would look to dominate most opponents, and the players knew it inside out. And with Jose Mourinho, despite what he said about a change style, we've not done that. We are more comfortable in dropping off. He said this season, I don't want them to drop off. I want them to go press, but they don't do it. And you're never quite sure if he's just lying through his teeth. But in terms of, we are sort of flip-flopping from 1 week. Like 1 week we play against Fulham. A few weeks ago we tried to have the ball. West Brom and teams in there that are after the league. And then we play against any team who's vaguely good. We sit back, we drop off. I just don't think it has consistent messages, and players are confused. There's no sort of automations in our attacking process. It's very much relying on individuals figuring things out. When you've got Kane, Son, players like that, they can do it. But even then, you find you're going to run up against a brick wall sometimes. And I think we've sort of unlearned a lot of Pochettino's methods, and I think we were relying on some of those sort of automations even in the early part of Jose Mourinho. So I think we've seen a bit of a backward step in style in the last year or so. And just from a fan perspective, they're not, fans aren't really enjoying it. They are enjoying it when we go out and just when like Bale, Son, Kane do their thing, and like we scored a few goals recently in some games, but I don't watch it and see it as a coached process. I see it as very much as an individual led process where he's just saying good players go out and play, which I think at the top level now just doesn't cut it. So that's a bit of a brief history of Pochettino and now Jose.
I think for me, where the issue is mainly as a Chelsea fan, remembering the Mourinho years fondly growing up, was that before, yourself being a coach, tutor, and UEFA A licensed candidate at the moment, of course, you can break the game down into a few different phases: the attack phase, the defense phase, and the two transitional phases. In the past, Mourinho was certainly a specialist in the counter-attacking phase, in that defense to attack transition. And I think back then, 10, 15 years ago, that gave weight to the narrative that you were a top coach in your ability to dominate one or two of the phases. I think we've got to the stage nowadays where you look at the likes of even a Graham Potter at Brighton, Brendan Rodgers at Leicester, Pochettino, of course, now at PSG, Klopp, Tuchel, all of these top-level coaches are generalists as regards all the phases. They have a plan with the ball, without the ball, and for both transitions. And I think it's that combination, along with man management. You see how the likes of Graham Potter doing a master's degree in emotional intelligence out of Brendan Rodgers gets the best out of his Leicester players. Tuchel, who's just gone into Chelsea, and it's like he's managing bloody 3 or 4 NBA teams at once with the size of Chelsea squad, everybody getting equal play time, so on and so forth. I think that's where there's a huge kind of gap between Tottenham and the rest in terms of how they're coached and managed. I don't know, would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back, you have to respect Jose Mourinho as one of the game's great coaches and innovators as well. He was a pioneer in the development. It was not development, sort of implementation of tactical periodization, which was groundbreaking at the time. And tactical periodization is about integrating your plan for all 4 phases into your training process. And this way back when he was at Porto and then came to the Premier League, this was like beyond anyone. And obviously, if you look back at this Porto team, there's some really grainy footage. He certainly wasn't that sit back and counter attack coach back then. He would have a plan for the Portuguese league, and then in the bigger Champions League games, he would play as we've come to know. What about who he is, but there was a big focus on opposition analysis. So if you go back to like 2004, 2005, when he came to the Premier League, I mean, if you look at sort of with respect to some of the coaches he was up against, this was not a strong field of competition. He must have found that season so easy because he came in with a completely new way of training, which was backed up by the players at the time, particularly English players who are used to playing a bit of five-a-side and just smashing the ball at a goal and training, and then and doing nothing else. And then they suddenly had these massive reports from AVB, who was his assistant back then. It had a completely transformative effect, and if you remember back then, it completely caught out Ferguson and Wenger, who themselves had come in and brought advances into the game, and they were caught out by this guy coming in. So he was hugely at the sort of vanguard of the development of the game. But time waits for no one, and the football moves on, and I'm not stupid enough to think that he doesn't know that. But whether it's got to a point where football has developed so far, and he's just not coping with not caught up with it. And I don't know. It seems such a basic thing to say, and you think anyone with half a brain should understand that. And I'm sure he does. And I'm sure he does look at himself and think, at the moment, because he knows his team isn't doing well. He's covering it up by talking about mentality, attitude. But I'm sure he's looking at it going, why are we not doing what I'm saying? I say we should be doing. So I really don't know. I'd love to see his training now and what goes on in it, and how it contrasts with others. But you look at the top coaches now, they are, as you said, like Graham Potter's got a master's in was it emotional intelligence, something like that.
Yeah.
Which is they are masters of understanding people and getting the best out of people, and obviously the tactical side of the game. And the 4 phases. I mean, it's very difficult to be dominant in all 4 phases. I think the best teams are obviously good in all phases, but dominant in probably 2 of them. So you're looking at Man City at the moment, obviously very dominant with the ball. Obviously, we know that, and then their defensive transitions are lightning quick. Also with a dash of tactical fouling in there. But it's a really interesting one, and it'll be interesting to see how people like Guardiola himself, will he ever become sort of outdated? I think people were suggesting that recently, and then they've gone on this crazy run. So it's an interesting one. I think coaches at the top level, they have a very short shelf life. I think particularly in the UK, we have the sort of the myth of Ferguson and Wenger, where every coach who comes in should be aiming to be there for 20 years. And I think, no, we've got a cycle of project managers now who've got 3 or 4 years in them, who build something, they reach a peak. And I think managers should be smart and go, right, I've done my bit. And this goes for Pochettino as well. No one wanted Pochettino to go. I'm still sad about him going. But if you look at it, at the end of that 18-19 season, we got to Champions League final. And the team, all the metrics, and just watching the team, we were declining somewhat. If he'd have left then, and then Tottenham brought in another project manager, a Nagelsmann or a Marco Rose, Graham Potter, something like that, to continue that work, but just refresh it again with a team who's used to playing that style, I think that would have been far more preferable. But it's an interesting one, and maybe Jose just needs to go away, go to another team who embraces him more thoroughly, and maybe he can enjoy success again. And but at the moment, it's just not happening.
I suppose coming up with a few excuses for Mourinho, could you say the current demise, I suppose, in Tottenham's recent form is a culmination of factors, be it the natural ending cycle of Poch's players, the COVID jammed schedule, and the absence of fans from what we've seen can be a raucous atmosphere at the new stadium, at the new White Hart Lane?
Absolutely. I think if you look at what he's had to deal with in terms of when he came into a squad that was, failing's a strong word, but a team which had just run its course, a group of players which hadn't seen a huge deal of refreshing in terms of the squad for quite a while, who'd given everything. They left absolutely everything on the pitch for Tottenham for eventually only memories and no actual silverware. So yeah, he had to galvanise that. And you've got some players like Harry Kane who are just single-minded, determined to do, to just perform at their best consistently. But even he was carrying injuries. His sort of form declined a bit. But I think that was more down to injuries rather than sort of his being just worn out at the end of a cycle. So yeah, he had that. Then obviously had COVID. Actually, COVID, it sort of helped him in a little way, and obviously trying to detach it from the horrific circumstances around the pandemic. But because we were suffering a major injury crisis, Kane and Son were both out, and then COVID came in, and it gave him a few extra months to work on team style. So I don't really use it too much of an excuse. And we came back, we were a little bit better after the break. Kane was back. Kane actually also benefited from the break because he came back fitter and fresher. So I do understand those excuses. With the stadium, I think, to be honest, I think if fans were in the stadium, I think Jose might already be gone, because some of these performances at home to these teams would have been unacceptable. There would have been like a toxic atmosphere at the ground. If you're losing and playing in your own half against Arsenal deliberately.
Is there any doubt he would have changed tack? He would have changed style to accommodate the fans, knowing that.
May have done. He's he has tried to change style a few times before, but he does get spooked by certain results. So we were playing okay this season, then it's like, okay, we're getting there. I can start to see where we're starting to go now. And then we were 3-0 up against West Ham, playing very, very well, threw it away. But, it was on the balance of play, we still deserved to win that game. And it almost seemed that game, it spooked him. Yes, we had a run of difficult fixtures coming up, so I think he would have played more defensively anyway. But I think that spooked him. We saw it a few years ago when Tottenham, when Pochettino's Tottenham beat Jose 5-3 at White Hart Lane, one of Harry Kane's breakout performances. And that was a season, 14-15, where Chelsea ended up winning the league. But there was a conscious effort to be a little bit more aggressive and attacking earlier in that season. Then Spurs win 5-3, and suddenly Jose went, no, we're going to sit back, play my way, and we're going to go and win the league. And yeah, fair enough. It worked. But he does get spooked by these games. But yeah, I think if you'd have put fans in the stadium, I don't think it would have helped too many, often these games, because yes, I think they might have thought, okay, we're willing to watch us have 15% of the ball against Man City, but against an Arsenal team that are below us, in the league, playing like that, when we'd got accustomed to going at them and beating them quite regularly under Pochettino, particularly at home, and playing really, really well against them, I don't think the fans would have accepted that one bit. I think there would have been a pretty toxic atmosphere, So yes, Mourinho will always have excuses, and whether he uses excuses publicly to take the heat off, off himself or whatever, that's fair enough. Maybe he does know the real reasons things are going wrong, but I'm not particularly willing to indulge in those excuses when he's had 18 months and we've not seen any great progression. And you've seen other teams in that time, in 18 months, see massive improvements in performance and style with the same constraints. So yeah, I'm not particularly willing to to engage in the excuses.
And if I were to put you on the spot, Chris, and to hand you the reins at your beloved Tottenham, I mean, would there be any particular style of play or formation which you would wish to employ, given the current players at your disposal?
Good question. With the current players, I mean, I think you've got all the ingredients, particularly in midfield and forward positions, to play a sort of positional, progressive possession game, similar to Pochettino. I'm not going to go deviate too far from that. I'm very, very influenced by him. So in terms of my coaching now, the team I coach, that's the sort of model we're looking for. So to be very, very good with the ball, very progressive, not particularly like focus too much on sort of deep circulation of the ball, pretty aggressive, because we want that counter press to be really, really aggressive. So if we're trying to progress the ball a lot, we know we're going to lose the ball a lot, but that's fine if we've got a good counter press. They're the two sort of phases we really want to be dominant in. And that's why I want with Tottenham right now. There's a lot of chat, that team, people to replace Jose, and people are suggesting like Ralph Hasenhüttl, who I think is a fantastic coach, but I don't think that style of play. I love watching it, but I think that his whole style of play is against the ball and the pressing and not a huge amount of work on the ball. I think that's probably underselling him a little bit there, but that's from what I've read about him and sort of watched on the pitch as well. So I want for our next coach, and if it was me, I would want that sort of playing with the ball and getting our most creative, brilliant players on it as much as possible. And yes, you can look at our defence and think, okay, Chris, are you really going to put Eric Dyer or Toby Alderweireld on the halfway line now, with the ball? And I'd say, yeah, I'd just accept a few complete, absolute, calamities, because I think that would happen. But I think the trade-off would be Harry Kane close to the opposition goal, and Heung-min Son close to the opposition goal, Gareth Bale there. But the one player that I would be, I wouldn't say build the team around, but would always be very, very much at the centre of things would be Dele, who I think has been unfairly sort of ostracised. I think he's a fantastic player. I think with Dele, a 4-2-3-1, where he's the number 10, I think that is sort of the model I'd go with. I mean, it would look very much like Pochettino, where I would have, Højbjerg and Ndombele as sort of the back of midfield, and Højbjerg would be the player breaking up play and playing it simple. So the sort of Eric Dyer / Wanyama role from a few years ago, and then you've got Ndombele, who is taking the ball forwards, dribbling forwards with the ball, passing progressively to Dele between the lines. I'd also have Giovanni Lo Celso as a sort of very, almost an inverted sort of right attacking midfielder. And then I have, Aurier, who I think we should be replacing, but as a sort of overlapping right back, and then Son wide on the left, and Reguilon at left back, with Kane up front. That is my sort of, that's how I see things at the moment. And I appreciate there are other ways of playing, but that's how I would look to do it. But yeah, as a coach, I want the ball. I want control of the ball and controlling transitions. So, where even if we're not setting pressing traps to win the ball back high, just if we are pressing to force the opposition to play long, straight back to our defence, and we build again, and we're sort of this kind of vice-like grip on the opponents, which we got used to, and I was very, very sort of inspired and I've studied like quite a lot of how I want to do that. So that's why I want to play with Tottenham. I accept any sort of progressive model of play. If we brought in Hassenhuttl, that would be fine. For Jesse Marsh at Salzburg, that kind of the high octane Red Bull style of play, fantastic. But if I was to be, ultra selective, someone like Julian Nagelsmann, who, yes, he is at Red Bull, but he has more of a positional idea with the ball. I think that's absolutely what I think I would want to do with this team, and what I think the team, the players we've got needs. And then you build from there, and then you fill in players who maybe don't fit that model of play from either the academy or smart recruitment, which I think we need a little bit of.
Yeah. And I think with the summer transfer window on the horizon, of course, and your own work fairly prominent with Inside Market, are there any interesting players, perhaps from a data perspective, which you would be interested in seeing at joining yourself at Spurs?
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to go away from the question. I'll look at a couple of players in a minute, but I think this transfer window is really important. I suspect we're going to see one big departure. I don't think it'll be Kane. I could see us moving on Son for a lot of money, which, I mean, I love Son. I think he's brilliant. I wouldn't be disappointed if he stayed, but if we got a big wedge of money for him, I would entertain that aspect and reinvest it in the squad and try and build a young, vibrant team again. That obviously it depends if Jose's here or not, which I'm getting the idea that he might not be next season. And this is the most important thing. And look at my recruitment work. I can sit here and try and recruit players for how I think Tottenham should play, but if I'm going in and saying, right, we want someone like Max Aarons at right back, Jose Mourinho is going to be like, no, he's 5 foot nothing. He's just going to get dominated in the air, which he does even in the Championship. So, I mean, and this builds into the recruitment work I do when we talk with clubs and say, what is your style of play? What is your profile of player? And then we work from there. So that's the important thing, right? So, it's difficult to talk about who we should sign in terms of, is Jose still going to be here? Is he not going to be here? But I think we need a great centre back. I'm really excited about Joe Rodon and Japhet Tanganga, who played at right back the other day. But I think long term he's a centre back. I think they're two really talented players. I think Eric Dyer's race is run at Tottenham. I don't see him at the moment, improving to an extent where we can be comfortable as him first choice. And same with Davinson Sanchez, got 1 fourth on loan, who I'd be interested in bringing back, but Jose Mourinho would never play 1 fourth as a centre back. So Alderweireld, I guess, is at the end of his, needs to be sort of phased out. So we definitely need, I think, a really good dominant centre back. And there's a few out there. We've been linked with Demiral, Juve, and Skriniar at Inter, who data-wise, they don't jump out the page on me. I can't say I've watched them extensively to form a completely solid opinion. One player I'm really huge on is Tapsoba at Bayer Leverkusen. I think his data looks incredible. I remember watching him before he moved to Leverkusen and was very, very high on him. And, it was the kind of player I think Tottenham should have been after. And there's so many players like this who I look at and think, if that's the kind of player.
Quick one to bring up. Speaking of Leverkusen,
yes,
right, Tapsoba players for them. Peter Bosch got sacked today.
He did.
What would you make of him racking up at White Hart Lane?
Oh, he's very, very aggressive and attacking, and I think has big issues with transitions. I mean, we'd attack. I'm sure we'd score a bucket load of goals, but I remember Pochettino dismantling that when we played Dortmund in 2017. He wouldn't be my first choice, but listen, I enjoy entertaining football. If it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But Daniel Levy's never heard of this guy. Daniel is, I think we'll get on to Levy in a bit, but it's not going to happen. But yeah, really love Tapsoba. Obviously, up in Meccano at Red Bull Leipzig. Really impressed with him. Kanate next, who also plays with him, had some injuries, but he's also talented. So I think we do need to invest in the market. But Tapsoba is just a player I just really love, and I always talk about him because I remember speaking like highly of him before he moved to Bias. I was like, yes, he's one of mine, you know. And it is, the scouts and recruiting people love to say, "Oh, I discovered this player." He didn't discover them. Any scout worth their money knows they're good, but we still hang on to them anyway. Yes, yeah, this is my guy. But yeah, if you look at his data, it's huge and very aggressive and very good on the ball, progressive passing, dribbling, carrying the ball. Yeah, he's my kind of defender, so I would be he'd be certainly someone up on the list. But again, these guys are expensive. We should be the team who can find them before they go there. But I think, as we talked about earlier in the program, in the podcast, we've got this idea now of our profile in the game where we now watch them go to sort of, you know, other clubs to check if they can do it in the top 5 leagues or whatever, and then go and buy them, which costs a lot of money. I guess, yeah,
There was one case of that this year, though, Chris, as well. It's funny that you bring it up. Was I watched a lot of La Liga last season? Saw Mohamed Salisu at Real Valladolid.
Yeah,
Thought he would get unbelievable game time this year at Southampton. Just hasn't transpired. But I suppose the football housing huddle wants him playing at the back. He's really struggled. I've seen him gone in there at centre back and left back. There's no doubt in my mind Tapsoba would adapt to playing Premier League football. I mean, his rise from playing second or third division in Portugal all the way up to Bundesliga at the moment has been exponential. But these conversations, it's nearly April. These conversations about who Tottenham and all the rest of the Premier League elite are bringing in next season are surely already happening. So,
yes,
doing your due diligence as a recruitment consultant, do you think it's quite feasible, Tottenham would have a plan for next season with Mourinho and without him in terms of recruitment?
That's a good question, because you could imagine Jose walking into the recruitment office and going, "What's that list you've got there?" And I'm like, "No, nothing. It's actually a list of if he gets that." That's a good question. But this goes back to what club do you want to be in? A club that has a solid philosophy, how you want to play, what coaches are going to replace the coach you've got at the moment who play a similar style. If you have all that in place, then your list, if you want to sign, doesn't really change. And I guess if you look at some of our recent signings, Joe Rodon, like a comfortable, progressive centre-back who hasn't really got that much game time, played against Villa the other day. Steven Bergwijn, a talented sort of wide forward. There actually were more in the, what I was looking for. These are, there's a bit of risk attached to them because they've not played at the highest level. But they've struggled under Jose. But it's no real surprise why they've struggled. I mean, Steven Bergwijn, I don't think he wanted to join Tottenham to play as sort of an auxiliary fullback, which is what he's done. And then watch Kane and Son have 2 counter-attacks a game and score 1 goal. And then people say, "Oh, Steven Bergwijn's not very good." So, well, he's not being used to his talents. So that's an interesting one. But I'd like to get back to what we've done, I guess, a little bit in the past. I mean, our recruitment's always been a little bit haphazard because Daniel Levy has far too much say in that. But yeah, players like, I would just like to identify these players who are excellent before we have to go and sign them from another big 5, which we have, with Rodon and Bergwijn, we haven't done that. But, I guess if we did go and try and sign the next like Tapsoba or the next Upamecano who costs 15-20 million rather than 60 million, there's a risk associated with that. And there's also time for them to bed in, improve and develop, where I think the Spurs fans are getting really anxious to have success and get back in the Champions League and win trophies. So it is a difficult one, I accept. And so, but yeah, I thought I'd bring up Tapsoba because I really, really like him. And in forward areas, you've got, I think we've got a bit of Deadwood to shift. I think he's certainly of Deadwood, but I think Son might possibly move on. I don't know why I think that, because there's been no real rumours of that. But we've got Lucas. So he's had a bit of a good spell at the moment, but he's still quite average. Lamela is not, certainly not the difference maker that you maybe want. So I might be looking to bring in another sort of forward player. Carlos Vinicius doesn't look like he's gonna stay through this loan, even though he scored the other day. So I think there's a sort of a forward who can play through the middle and wide, possibly someone like Daniel Malum, who has a bit of time to adapt rather than being chucked in at the same time. A player like that who's, I think wouldn't cost huge amounts. He'd still cost a fair wedge, but I think has the upside there. So I think someone, we could look at him. Obviously, there's Pedro Neto at Wolves, who's been doing really well. I think as a replacement for Son, if he went, would be a fantastic signing. All these guys' data is pretty good. They're young and they've got upside. You look at like someone like Son, who we brought in. We nearly sold him in the first season. He didn't. Yeah, he was good, but he wasn't fantastic. So it sometimes takes time. But back then, Spurs were different, and we had time to bed Skillman Son in for a season. So, I sound a bit confused about the whole thing. So I and I've gone on a bit of a ramble here, but yeah, it is a difficult one to mix. Do we buy players who we absolutely know who are going to be fantastic? Well, you don't know, but could be as sure as possible. Or do you go back to taking a few more risks in the transfer market and building up a young, vibrant team again, who may take a season to sort of ignite under a progressive manager? And just sorry, the last one I've missed out. I think we've got very good potential in central midfield with Højbjerg and Ndombele, Lo Celso, all at good ages, very, very talented, but haven't got a huge amount behind them. I think Sissoko it should never have been. It could come to the fact that he's played so many minutes for Tottenham, and the fact he was sort of a linchpin for our midfield for so long showed where we really went wrong. I think Harry Winks is more than a functional sort of bench player and situation player. But I'd like to see. I think Højbjerg needs some more cover. I think we need a player who can play a 6, but also a more sort of progressive, like 6, 8, in midfield. So someone like Anguissa from Fulham, who I think would probably cost quite a lot of money now, because I think people are starting to recognise his talent. Same with Yves Bissouma at Brighton. 2 players I'm massive fans, and I absolutely love Anguissa. I think if you put Anguissa in a top team, Champions League level, people will start going, where did this guy come from? This guy's fantastic. And it's like, he's always been like this. His data is ridiculous at Fulham. I would love to see him play for Tottenham. And I think a midfield where you could have like Højbjerg, Anguissa, and Ndombele and Lo Celso in it would just offer so many possibilities. But again, do we have the money to fund these players if we don't sell someone like Son? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer, but I think the main sort of piece of recruitment might well be in the manager's chair in the dugout.
And I suppose to close down, Chris, what constitutes success at Spurs this season and next? Given that we're near the end of this season, it's more than likely where we see Tottenham both finishing. But next season, what could Spurs hope for?
Short term is quite an easy one. I think, if we were to turn the season around and manage to sneak into the top 4, that would be, I would consider that from where we are now, as a success in the short term. Obviously, winning the League Cup would be good. It'll be so sort of weird winning a title with no one winning a trophy with no one in the ground. The thought of me as a fan not being able to go and watch it hurts. So I really don't know what I think about it. But winning that, when we talk about long term, and Pochettino got a lot of stick for sort of saying stuff like this. Like, winning a League Cup is not going to change the course of Tottenham. Winning the League Cup in 2008 did not change the course where Tottenham were going. And even if you go back and watch that final, beat Chelsea, the commentary at the end of the game was like, "Is this the new era for Tottenham? This going to be the start of it?" And it wasn't. And what it was, that our improvement over the next 12 years since then, in terms of our league performance, has been smart management off the pitch, which has built a new stadium, which has built a new training facility, which has put money into the academy, which has developed players like Harry Kane where we did, at points of, I said our recruitment's been a bit scattergun, but it's generally been around signing young players with high potential and then selling them on. And, whilst a lot of fans say, well, we've not won anything, we've still seen sort of improvements in the squad. And I think that's just what I want in the future. I want to remain competitive. I want to be going as a fan to consistently big games. I want to be going to Champions League games to trying to go deep into cups. And I think if you get that process right of good recruitment, enjoyable playing style, where people talk about Tottenham, the profiles built, entertaining players to watch, entertaining teams to watch, I think the trophies will follow at some point, and I think we've been unlucky not to get them so far. So for me, it's not saying success in Tottenham is winning the league, winning a trophy, because I'm sure we will see that at some point in the not too distant future. But success for Tottenham is not, for me, is budgeting our future on some short-term success, winning even a league title. I mean, Christ, if we won a league title, I'd go missing for days. But if there was nothing after that, that's not success. And you want Tottenham to be there or thereabouts all the time. And it was just so good being a Spurs fan between 2016 and 2019, because you were consistently going to massive games, knowing that you can beat these teams, knowing that you could, playing Real Madrid and you could beat them, beating the top 6 teams quite regularly. That was success for me as a club. And I guess I thought it was success then because I always believed the trophies would follow. And I still think they will. And, we got to the Champions League final. That would have been, if we'd have won that, then, everything that had gone into the past would have been thoroughly vindicated. So I think, it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but I think just smartening up in a few aspects, like basically outsourcing a lot of the decision-making from Daniel Levy. Any football decision-making, take away from Daniel Levy, get proper football operations in place, and let him manage the business side. And I really think we can pick up a few trophies and a couple of big trophies in the next few years, and that would be success. That for me, if we're just consistently playing in the Champions League, consistently playing big games, entertaining me, and sorry for a bit of a wishy-washy answer to end the pod, but that's success for me, is just being competitive in the big tournaments consistently.
Oh, that's a good answer. Chris, it's always fascinating to get an insight into enemy lines. Should anyone wish to connect with you on social media, where's best to find you and your work?
So if you enjoy reading lots of miserable tweets about Tottenham, you can follow me at Chris Summersell. So that's Chris and then SUMMERSELL. On there, I share some of my football work on there, a bit less recently because a lot of my sort of work is in-house now in terms of recruitment, but I try to share the odd kind of thing. I write for Scouted Football, which I should mention them because they're really good, and give them a follow and buy their handbooks. I write for them. So that's where you can find me. But it'd be good to connect. Please, message me, and if you want any help or advice in coaching or recruitment, anything like that, happy to help. But thank you for having me. It's great.
Yeah, great having you on, Chris. I believe we could do a whole new podcast on Jose Mourinho and Daniel Levy maybe another time, but we'll have to.
The all or nothing special.
Chris, top man, pleasure having you on.
Cheers, mate.